Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Interviews, brought to you by the University of Science and Philosophy. I'm your host, Matt Presti. For this third installment, we're going to feature Margaret Ruhe, who gave a presentation at Swannanoa for the One Heart Festival Homecoming in September of 2013. Margaret was Lao's personal assistant for many years, and I think you'll find this interview highly enjoyable. On behalf of the USP, I'd like to thank Margaret Ruhe and Richard Delaney and the Center of the One Heart for the authorized use of this footage. To learn more about the One Heart Center, please visit oneheartcenter.org. Now, I encourage all of you who are fans of the Russell's teachings to attend the One Heart Center Homecoming, which will be held at Swannanoa on September 12th and 13th, 2015. This is a great opportunity to get to meet other Russell students and researchers and to enjoy the grounds and get a tour of the historic palace, Swannanoa. Without further ado, Margaret Ruhe.
Well, thank you. What I am hoping to convey is a little bit more of the personal side of Lao. Is there anybody here that met Lao personally? That's nice. It's nice to know that there's a few. Because Lao had an energy and a presence. Let me just ask you to do this one little exercise. Just close your eyes quietly. Let's try and tune down the room. And just close your eyes for just a short while, just 15 seconds. Do you feel that presence in the room? That's the same presence that Lao emanated when she came down these stairs. And I came from Canada because I had read their books. I was fortunate. I was 17 years old. I had a teacher in high school, and he taught physics, which was my favorite subject. And he spoke about the Russells in class, and he was so animated and fascinated. And I approached him afterwards, and he gave me the little book, The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe. And you know, I was 17 and I read that book and I felt like I found my spiritual home. I was overwhelmed by the knowledge in that one little book. And for 5 years, I asked my dad every birthday, every Christmas, I said, I want more books from Lao Russell and Walter Russell. And my dad did it. He was a little concerned. He thought I was a little upset, a little obsessed about it, you know. But he did it. And I can remember hanging on the mailbox for that issue of the home study course, just hanging on it, studying it. There was something in their teachings that for me, I was a frustrated Catholic. I could not understand orthodoxy. You know, that all these repetition, Jesus came and died for our sins. You know, what does that really mean? You know, I was very frustrated with it. So I came to hopefully meet Lao Russell. I wasn't sure if I was going to meet her. And I came to Swannanoa, and this is what I first saw. It was in dusk. I had come up by bus. I walked up the mountain and saw the Christ figure at this time of night. And the same presence you felt in the room just now is exactly what I felt when I approached the Christ figure. She had it inscribed, love ye one another, and I felt that love emanating from, and it's a statue. But because Lao sculpted it, she put her energy, her love into it, it emanates. And it would be wonderful one day that we may be able to put it back up, recreate it, whether it's here or somewhere, because everybody should have the privilege of experience what I did when I approached the Christ figure. But as I said, it was let me just get this going here. This is a picture of me, actually. You can't recognize me now. I was very thin and long hair, but very enamored with the work and with the Russells. The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe. If anybody here has not read that book, I highly, highly recommend it. It's actually offered for free on the philosophy.org website. And when you read the books, I always read it quietly and alone and really absorb it. The Christ figure I told you about. Now, I did have the opportunity to meet Lao when I first came. The gardeners in the back, you may have met Jimmy yesterday, and Johnny Bonzo was here also. They were gardening in the back, and they said, Lao had just come back from her walk. So please, if you want to meet her, go meet her. So I rushed up to the front door here, and Lao was sitting on the couch here in front of the fireplace, and she invited me over. And the same energy I felt from the Christ figure was coming from her that very first meeting. And she must have picked up on something. Lao always said she saw herself in everybody. When you're approaching someone that has had illumination, she has already been where I was. She could see herself there, and she could tell I was troubled over something. I was trying to get out of a difficult relationship. I had a dominating boyfriend at the time. And what's interesting is she asked me what my birthday was. And I said, I told her. She said, oh, you're in a 9 year. She said, it's a year for finishing up, tying up loose ends so that you can set yourself up for your 1 year. And I took that to heart. But it was very impactful for me to meet her. I went home to Canada. I spent another year studying the Russells, trying to figure out what I should do. And I read the book, Atomic Suicide. Now, Matt Presti referenced that book a lot yesterday. Atomic Suicide changed everything for me. And it actually gave me a personal directive. I read that book, and I knew that I had to come to Swannanoa. I knew I had to come and help Lao in any small way or any big way. Because if she could further her work even more, that was what my purpose was. And I can't tell you enough how strong that desire was. So I again got on the bus and hiked up the mountain. And I didn't knock on the door, actually. I went straight to the gardens. And this is what the gardens looked like when I came. Very well maintained, beautiful. But that brickwork had weeds all the time. And I just went into the gardens and I started weeding the brickwork. I thought I want to help her in any way. I know I've got to start from the bottom. So I actually was in the gardens for 2 or 3 days, and Jimmy and Johnny were kind enough to invite me in. I was given a room downstairs, which was a thrill, of course. And I had a dream of Walter Russell that very first evening I slept here. And Walter Russell was conferring with Lao about me. And it was a very approving energy that I received in the dream. And so I continued to work, and then Lao called me upstairs, and she said, well, Margaret, what is your intention? And I said, my intention is to help you in furthering your work. And she accepted that. And I think this is how she drew people to her. She managed this place with very minimal staff, but the people that came, I think, were called. Whether it's for 11 years like me, or 2 years, or 3 months, people were called to assist. And that was really how she was able to run Swannanoa on a shoestring budget. And one day, she had come back from her walk. She was on the circular drive here in the back. And she said, well, Margaret, can you type? And I said, yes, but not quickly. But what impacted me there is, Leah was an illuminate, and she had done all this. She had done the garden, she had typed, she'd written the book, she'd done all the mundane things in life. And it struck me, we get caught up in mundane events, but that's actually what builds a life. And that really impacted me so much because I think we get caught up in our mundane things. I'm a realtor in the Washington, D.C. area, and actually it was a good exercise for me to come here and recall all my memories of Lao because it helps to center me. But you can get caught up in being busy, and sometimes you forget to develop your spirituality. And you don't always want to be busy. It's not really balanced. You want to be calm, and you do want to seek the quiet within. I was in the gardens 2 weeks, and Lao asked me to come inside and start doing the tour. She had let go the tour lady, and I had no training. And she said to me, well, Margaret, you've read the books. You know this material. You just go around and talk about it. And I was nervous. I was young, 22. And so I went around. I thought I did a good job on my first tour. And of course, after several years, I became very good at it. And Lao and Russell and I had a nice energy. When we had bus groups come up, senior citizens groups, I would take them through part of the tour, and Lao would be sitting up there, and she could hear me coming toward the front. And so she would come down, and I would announce, oh, there's Lao Russell. And everybody felt so privileged that she would come down and meet them. And Lao did have a living philosophy, as I say. She'd look out to a sea of people, and she could really pick one person and speak to them, and it would draw everybody else in. And her best-selling book is her book, Love. And she told me, she said it was her most difficult book to write because she wrote it to the lowest common denominator. She didn't write it to a scientist. She didn't write it specific to anybody, to the lowest common denominator. When you write that way, it's very hard. So she wanted anybody from 9 to 98 to read that book and appreciate it. And actually, that's how she furthered the work, because you get people tied in to the love book, and they'll eventually want to read The God Will Work With You But Not For You, which is the main general textbook of her teachings. My personal favorite is Why You Cannot Die. I think that's her most brilliant book. But she wrote to the lowest common denominator. And you'll see how beautiful everything looked when she was here. She got all these tables together. She did much of this work herself. She actually cleaned up the palace, as you heard earlier. She was a workhorse. And, I know that a lot of you here have probably worked very hard in your lives. And it's encouraging for me because she said that the more you put out, the more that comes back to you. And it's very true, because the more you put out, God will compensate you. And I've learned that in the years since Swananoa. I've worked very hard. And I feel now, each time I go back and read their books, I understand it more and more and more, because you express this in your workaday world. In real estate, you have to be very ethical. When you express ethics, you're expressing the law of balance. And I think that's why I feel the Russells have given me a really great life framework. I don't feel stressed. I don't feel lost. When you know this material, you feel really calm within yourself. And yes, there's a lot of adversity, but you also know that that's man's error. And there is a way, ultimately, it'll have to be balanced. It does create agony for everybody else, and it does have to be balanced. And I think it's tremendous that Richard and One Heart has put this together, because if you can educate people more to the source, the energy that you felt in the room, that source, if you can tie into that, and hopefully our corporations will tie into it. Our corporations have skewed everything, and really they express greed to the nth degree, and it's wreaking havoc. And I often wish if only we could have a rating system online where the corporations would be rated for their ethics, right? Because they don't account for the externalities that they create. They put it all on the taxpayers. It's unbalanced. If we could create a rating system for corporations so we know who we should give our business to, I think that would be an important step. But as I say, Lao Russell really created an event here at Swannanoa. People felt her love, her energy. Now the mission, perhaps a lot of you already know of it. The Christ figure is inscribed, "Love ye one another." And she says, every little act you do, whether it's serving an injured bird, or whether it's taking care of cats, or whether it's taking care of your dog, every little act, you're expressing God already. All you have to do is multiply that. And really, every job is a job of service. And Lao used to say that also everybody is truly a salesman. You know, I sell houses. Lao sold love. She sold knowledge. But everybody has something to sell. It's an interchange, personal interchange, business interchange. Her mission, and she said this repeatedly to me, she said, it's all in the books. Let's just get the books out. Because her emphasis here was the written word. When she wrote her books, she really, truly was in the light in writing her books. You know, a lot of credit is given to Walter Russell and his 39 day and night illumination. Lao Russell came through with the knowledge at birth. She didn't need a big illumination. She came through with it at birth. By the time she was 3, she knew of her purpose on earth. She was writing fairy stories when she was just a young teenager, and that was expressing a philosophy. And so she said to me, Margaret, we just got to get the books out. And so our emphasis here with the tours was we inspired people to see what can be done. Like all of the works that Walter Russell had displayed here, it was a demonstration of what one man accomplished. And you know, Walter Russell, when he was 75 in New York in Carnegie Hall, he was in debt. He had 36 tons of sculpture in his studio. Lao Russell, too, I think was a little bit lost. She knew of a mission, right? She knew she had a mission. She was in Boston, and somebody gave her the little book, The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe. She didn't know Walter Russell. And her friend said to her, Lao, you've got to read this book. This man sounds just like you talking. And so she read the book, and she said she knew Walter Russell was waiting for her. She knew they were going to be married. And she was, nervous. She read that book 3 days, three times running. And she picked up the phone, and she's going to call Walter Russell. And he picked up the phone, and she said, I've just been reading this little book about you, and I find myself expressed. And Walter Russell said, where are you? There's something in your voice I recognize. When can I see you? Can I see you in the morning? And she explained that she was in Boston, he was in New York. And he said, well, you get me a room at once. I'm coming up to see you. And she said they had a conversation for 2 hours. They were already planning on how they were going to disseminate this work. She actually had one half of the message, and Walter Russell had the other. Walter Russell had the scientific half. She had the philosophy half. But neither one of them were really going anywhere until they came together. And it was really the brilliance of their meeting, the fact that she also had a managing capability in creating Swannanoa, because that was largely Lao Russell. When Lao met Doctor, he was not well. He was 75, frail. He hadn't been taking care of himself, tired. And so one of the great things she did in managing was in getting his health up. She was very instrumental in that. This is the library, and this is where we had all the books displayed. And again, Lao Russell loved to sign and autograph the books, and each time she did, she spent really quality time with each of the recipients, and I'll never forget it. She, again, clued in to what that person needed. Now, coming to the science, she contributed to the science also. Walter Russell had 10 octaves, and the science, Lao told him, no, it's 9. And Walter Russell, just like that, a light bulb went off, and he said, now, why didn't I think of that? It's 9 octaves, not 10. You have to reduce the 10 back to a 0. And then also, Walter Russell originally in the Universal One expressed positive and negative. Positive for the male, negative for the female. And Lao Russell said to him, darling, do you think I'm negative? And he said, you certainly are not. And she said, it's not a charge. It's not a representation of a charge, but rather a representation of condition. And that's why you have red for male and green and blue for female. And it's expressed in metals. You have a soft metal, a female metal, or a hard metal. And you also have the inner hard core, which is male, or the outer expansive layer, which is female. And so this is what she contributed. It makes a huge difference in understanding the science. It's not actually a plus or a minus. This is my personal favorite, as I said. What's interesting about the science, too, and Lao Russell was instrumental in disseminating the science. Now, she put the science, and this is on purpose, they created a puzzle with their writings, and she spoke of this often. She said the science is throughout all of their material. It's throughout their books, their home study course, even in the love book. Okay, so she said only a deep student will really find the key to their science. She doesn't want it going out to anybody because science can be used for good or bad. She knew this, and she knew that there had to be a balancing of the human relations before the science really comes out. I think now the science is more and more developed. I think there's already technologies available. It's just that the special interests have really prevented that expression also. But why the urgency? And I speak of urgency because I felt it when I read Atomic Suicide. Lao Russell had a sense of urgency. And actually, working here at Swannanoa was not easy. I remember one gardener, he lasted 3 months. And he slinked off in the middle of the night. He just felt too much pressure, you know. And he felt badly afterwards and wrote Lao. But there was pressure because, you know, when you're ahead, I guess, of the human race, you can see what needs to be done and you want it done. And Lao Russell worked very fast. She thought fast. She knew what needed to be done. She was doing it. And so she expressed that, and I guess she wanted to get everybody else's engines running, you know. And I was there, you know. I felt the urgency. I said, yeah, let me just do whatever I can do. And she made this comment once. She asked for, it was something simple, you know. She needed something cleared off the floor. She liked things clean. And I did it right away. And she said, well, Margaret's the only one that listens to me, you know. But I felt like I was an extension of her. And somebody criticized me one time. They said, you know, Margaret, you're just a shadow of Lao. And I told this to Lao one time, and she said, well, I need a shadow, you know. She needed somebody that could help extend her efforts. But the urgency, and this was hinted upon by Jim Porter in his class yesterday. You know, Lao said that asteroids are not really nature-made. They're really man-made. And she used to say, well, we've blown ourselves up before. Let's not do it again. And you know, this was the era where we had just been through a lot of atomic blasts, atomic testing, and obviously that was a energy that they were dead set against. But if you look at Jupiter and Mars, in between there's an asteroid belt. That's actually evidence of a planet that we were probably on, that we had blown ourselves up. And so the planets, if you know any of the science, actually they're born from the equator of the sun, they move out. And this, of course, takes eons of time. But Jupiter at one time was where the Earth is. It moves out. And Mars at one time was where the Earth is. And they all move out, and then as they move further, like Pluto's been downgraded, they don't even consider it a planet anymore, but Pluto has drifted out so far, its orbit is skewed. And you know, the orbits actually eventually will come to right angles. And this picture, the key to this picture, Lao Russell told this to one of our visitors, she said that represents a comet returning to the sun. And in this picture, you'll see a comet here in the upper left. It's very skewed. It's approaching to right angles, very strongly elliptical, so the orbit becoming way out here. But eventually, it'll simply return to the sun. The solar system is actually a closed system, which is actually why she said UFOs was not a possibility, because a UFO couldn't come to this planet. It would be crushed, because the pressures of this planet are so different from where it would have come from. It's just not possible. It's a closed system. Her talents, Lao Russell was an artist. These are watercolors she did when she was 4 and 5 years old. She modestly displayed these upstairs in her sitting room. She was a sculptress. And I think the interesting part of the Christ figure is it was her vision. She was overlooking the rockfish gap here, and Christ had his hands on her shoulders and overlooking the valley with her. And very strong features, very strong jaw. And she said Walter Russell couldn't get her vision. And so for 5 days running, she kept saying, "No, darling, not like that, but like this." And he said, "Well, you do it, honey." And she picked up the clay from his hand and did it right away. And he was amazed. And she said, "Well, darling, you shouldn't be amazed. You started sculpting in the same way." And so she said she put Walter Russell to bed at midnight, and she would come down and sculpt a lot of detail on the figure as well, not just the face. As I mentioned, she was great with Walter Russell. She made sure that he got plenty of fresh air, good food. She ate organic foods. And Walter Russell always said that in the 17 years he had with her, he accomplished more than in the 75 years he had without her. You know, the fruition of his work came about. This is an incident. It was in 3 Mile Island in 1979. And it was a scary period. It was 13 days on the news every night. Unfortunately, there was a human error involved. The temperatures were rising 5,000 degrees on the core. And then what was even more ominous was that there was a hydrogen gas bubble forming inside. And the NRC even warned of a possible meltdown. Well, I came upstairs. I was going to get Lao Russell her tea. And she had just come up from the settee. You'll see the settee here. I call that her power chair. She had just come up from that, and she said, "Margaret, I think I've done it. I felt the release. I think I've done it." And later that evening, the news came on that the hydrogen gas had been dissipated or released. In other words, the threat of the explosion was gone. And I'm thinking to myself, did Lao do that? You know, because she did have really remarkable powers. And I think what she did, just in studying the science since that incident, I was young and I thought, wow, did she do that? And I think she gave it some type of a compressive force, or she altered the chemistry of the hydrogen. So I don't know. But she did take people into the light, and one student in California was diagnosed with cancer and called Lao and was very concerned. And Lao said to her, well, just remember that the surgeon's hands are God's hands. And it was a few days later, and Lao had taken Billy into the light, and she felt the release. A few days later, she was under the surgeon's knife, and they opened her up, and there was no cancer. They closed her right back up again. And Billy called her, and she said, Lao, I know it was you. But she would take people into the light. She actually did it for Walter Russell twice. She said one time Walter Russell his body was almost cold, and she managed to bring him back. And my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and she told me she tried to bring him back, but she didn't get the feeling of release. And so she wasn't able to help my father. So if she got that release, she knew that she was successful in helping somebody. This picture I added because it reminded me of something that she said. She said when Walter Russell refolded, a new star came into the heavens. And of course I went out looking for it. But how do you find something like that? And she did relate a story of Walter Russell. She had woken up with a very vivid dream. She said Walter Russell was sitting on his throne, on his planet, and he had outstretched his arms to her and beckoned her to come. And she said it was very pleasant, just a nice connection. And these pictures are interesting. She was having her photograph taken here on the steps, and the lady next to her, it was her husband, taking Polaroid shots. And you can see they weren't coming out, so he was crushing the pictures. They just weren't coming out, and he kept crushing them. And so Leo said to him, well, I want to see what's going on. And this was the picture that was handed to her. And she said, well, that's Walter Russell. And somehow Walter Russell, from the ethers or from the source, he was able to express his image onto the Polaroid for her. And that day she was particularly low. You know, she felt a little defeated. And so this really made her day, really. Yeah, that's her on the left side. And Walter Russell loved to wear brightly colored house coats, and he had a beret. He loved to wear the beret. So that's Walter Russell. And I told you about how they met. This is my favorite picture of Walter Russell in his youth. He looks very pensive, perhaps wondering where his Leo is. But you know, Leo said one thing to me. She said, you know, Margaret, had she met Walter Russell when he was younger, he would not have listened to her. She said timing was everything. Because at the time that they met, he was 75. He needed help. He was ready to listen. And so he always said, you listen to my Leo. She knows what she's talking about. You listen to my Leo. And it was always my Leo. And Lao Russell just recounted that very fondly. She said that after their work a day, she would get a very simple dinner ready and a pot of tea. And Walter Russell would sit up here. They had an organ at the landing. And he'd sit to the organ. He says, now I'm courting you, darling. And you know, those little moments, she said, were the most treasured she had of Doctor. And she always said that as long as you're in a body, you need the little personal things to keep you going. And that's what she really felt with Walter Russell. Now, her opinions, religion, of course, is a big one. What I mentioned earlier is, you know, we're always told that Jesus came to die for our sins. You know, what does it really mean? Leo said, no, he came to save us from the belief in sin, because everything is good. It's a universe of good. And the German lady that spoke yesterday alluded to this also. It's not necessary to have evil. Evil is actually man's ignorance of God. And so if he's ignorant of God, he can't express it. So he really should just blame himself, not God, for that, right? And life is a two-way motion. In the Bible, it's referenced as everlasting life, right? What does that really mean? Well, Lao said there is no death. It's only activity and rest. We mistaken rest for death, but it isn't death. When we started out and we had 15 seconds of silence, it's very alive, very alive. Just because there's a disappearance doesn't mean it's not there. So it's very alive. And then don't blame God. So many people say, why does God bring the storms? Why does God bring an earthquake or a tornado? God has to balance what man is doing. God has to bring some balance. So we do have choice to the action. We can throw ourselves off a cliff. We have that choice. But God keeps authority over the reaction. So if you know God's ways and processes and you live within them, you create a wonderful life for yourself. But don't blame God. The virgin birth, she related an incident when she spoke to a monastery. And they asked her, well, Lao, do you believe in the virgin birth? And she said, well, even God can't violate his own ways and processes. So she did not believe in the virgin birth. You wait till Judgment Day. What this is she was outside. She was just leaving for her walk, and a minister was returning from the garden. And the minister, they got to talking, and the minister said, well, Lao, do you believe that every word in the Bible is God's word? And she said, of course not. I hope you don't. And he said, you wait till Judgment Day. You'll burn in hell. You wait till Judgment Day. And she realized from that point on, she had to temper her responses. And she approached, a lot of ministers came here to see her. And so she learned, she said, when a minister said something to her, she would acknowledge what was said and then seemingly, be approving of it. But then she would enter her own little kernel of truth. Because she said then they were receptive to what she was saying. So she didn't take this adversarial approach. She wanted an open flower bed. She wanted to be able to plant seeds. And this is actually what she did with her love book. The love book is simple, makes you happy to read it. But she was planting seeds with every book that went out. We had so many couples that would come and they say that love book is what brought them together, or it was what helped them avoid a divorce. So UFO's not possible, I alluded to that. And then this one, when I saw the presentation yesterday on the cube mirror, I thought of this. Leah was sitting here. This was her favorite room for quietude. It was her sitting room. And I had just served her some tea, and I had mentioned something about, the vast distances in space and the galaxies. And she said, Margaret, everything is in this room. Everything is in this room. And, I was young, but she was always correcting my thinking. And when I saw the cube mirror yesterday, it made me think of that. Everything is in this room. And we were going on a walk, and we were coming back, a beautiful sunset, and went all the way around. So I made this comment. I said, look, Leah, it's all the way around. And she said, no, it's going from cube wave field to cube wave field. So she had to correct my thinking. And then we were coming back another day, and she looked up at this, and she made this comment. She said, there's no parallel lines in nature. It's all radial. It radiates out. No parallel lines. Her habits, I added this only because sometimes, if you've read an author's books, you want to get to know a little bit about them. She was very big into organic, clean food. And so she was also big on supplementation where it was needed. A gentleman came into her life at this time, Sam Bowser. He was quite instrumental in helping her with some of the health issues. She had worked hard, and her heart was weak, and she had suffered a heart attack about 6 months prior to my coming. And so Lao was actually a little distrusting of hospitals. Her doctor wanted her to be on nitroglycerin the rest of her life. And she said, no, I'm not going to do that. She called Sam Bowser. He was a student, and he was a health journalist. He really seemed to know a lot of the cutting-edge things. So he introduced her to hawthorn berry syrup. She used to take a teaspoon of cayenne pepper and wash it down with water and to strengthen her heart. She did bone tea, hair analysis for a customized supplementation program, drank raw goat's milk. So anything that was of God, she would try. Anything man-made, very hesitant.
Where did the powder of chicken feed come from?
Yeah, that was through Sam Bowser. That was, yeah. Actually, chicken feet, very high in gelatin and protein. Excellent source of protein. So, well, it was a very high, really almost a pharmaceutical grade. Yeah, I know, it's, yeah. Fresh air and escape was important to her. There was a cottage in the back. She would escape, and she loved to also do her letters back there. Salad every day, 3 veggies, meat. She said the interchange of bodies is all through nature. She didn't have any qualms of eating meat, no ethical qualms. She loved English tea. She loved Earl Grey, milk and honey. And also she drank a lot of water, which unfortunately was not the right water now that I know about Kangen water. If you all haven't heard about Kangen water, visit this couple here on this corner, because it's been the greatest thing that I've done for my own health. And actually what it is, since I know a little bit of the science, is the Kangen, it's a medical grade technology. It adds a charge to the water, right? Your body is simultaneously charging and discharging. As you get older, you're discharging more than you're charging. The Kangen water reverses that. It adds a charge to the water and allows your body to charge more effectively. And it was huge for me. But Lao Russell, if she had had it, she had early signs of diabetes. If she had had this water, that would have been averted. Did she watch TV? Guess what her favorite program was? Touched by an Angel. Michael Langdon, Touched by an Angel. You know, she did watch TV in the evenings, rarely in the day. She did have a sciatic issue at one point where she was laid up, and then she loved to watch Oprah. She loved Oprah, and she used to watch Dynasty, John Carrington. For music, she loved Elvis Presley and Gary Cole. She said when she first heard Elvis Presley on the radio, she said, that's an old soul. She loved Elvis Presley. Her favorite sayings, I'll just go through these quickly. She loved her little dog, and she used to say, you are the luckiest dog in the world. You are the luckiest dog in the world. She loved her little Jimmy. She referenced Shakespeare. She always felt Walter Russell was Shakespeare. But he said, it's a world of sound and flurry signifying nothing. She's referring to man's world, you know. And give people an inch and they'll take a yard. And what she means by that, when you give out of yourself, give wisely. If you overgive, they'll treat you like a doormat. So give wisely. You have to keep it in balance. Anticipate what can happen and avoid it. So, you know, anticipate if an accident can happen and avoid it. Familiarity breeds contempt. You know, a messenger is rarely recognized within their own town. Familiarity breeds contempt. Sword of Damocles, she said that a lot because that's how she felt about her situation with Swannanoa. You know, they didn't own the property. She had tried to purchase it. She had hoped that she could purchase it. She was worried about perpetuity. And so she felt like it was a sword of Damocles over her head, that she couldn't settle that before she refolded. Her instructions, just quickly, she and Walter Russell were told, do not heal en masse. You have to teach people how to heal themselves. And the God will work with you, but not for you. Really touches on that. Focus on the written word. And by ye works ye shall know them. And the demonstration of Swannanoa expressed that. This time thou shalt not fail. That was what God told her. Thou shalt know death, resurrection, and renewal. I think that's yet to express itself. The floodwaters will come to your doorstep. That could mean this doorstep or maybe the doorstep of Virginia. I don't know. It will be the weather conditions that will make men listen to the message. And that's probably what is coming up. And there was a very specific instruction to her about not leaving the mountaintop. And all that is not of me will be removed. But that was a specific instruction. And then don't alter the writings. You know, they came through with all this knowledge in the light. Their writings are very poetic. And so she said, don't alter the writings. And then my personal takeaways as ethics. I'm in business for myself, and I'm not wanting of business. People, I always get referrals. So the expression of this principle in business is tremendous. That's why if the corporations could learn it, we could really see huge abundance. Balance in giving, I touched on that. And then you become the other, so be careful who you choose for friends, who you relate to. You become the other, because their mannerisms, their thinking becomes a part of you. And the life framework that I mentioned earlier, and the peace. I added this because Leo one time, she said, Margaret, I think you were Edna St. Vincent Millay. And I didn't know who she was, but I found out later she was a poet. And I thought, oh, I've got to look her up, you know. And then a week before she refolded, she said, Margaret, I think you were my mother. And she lost her mother when she was 12. Very difficult point for her and her dad when she was 13. So I think it does make more sense. I don't think I was smart enough to be Edna St. Vincent Millay. But it made more sense that I would return to finish the caregiving and the assistance that I was able to offer her. And in real estate, there's something called highest and best use. We learned a lot about the 100th anniversary. And with Swannanoa, you know, Lao and Walter Russell, their school was here for close to 50 years. And if you look at these pictures, if only this could be what it is today. Truly, yeah, did you like that one? Yeah, the 4 freedoms. You know, truly, the University of Science and Philosophy, Walter and Lao Russell, was the highest and best use of this property. And so maybe one day, if we can't manifest it here, maybe we can manifest it in her dream. She wanted a 600-foot Christ figure so people from all over the world could come. And she always envisioned that it might happen up here, a little further up toward the back of the mountain. That was her vision, and Walter Russell had hoped to see it initiated too. But of course, that's for the future. That's for us to do.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed that presentation by Margaret Ruhe for our 3rd installment of interviews. A couple quick announcements. Lao Russell's book, Love, has been reprinted as a hardback and is also available as an ebook. And we also have the Home Study Course 3rd edition, which will soon be made available as an ebook. So check out our Facebook page to stay up to date on all the announcements and the current events that are happening through the University of Science and Philosophy. As always, you can visit us on the web at www.philosophy.org, that's philosophy.org, or call 1-800-882-LOVE. That's 1-800-882-5683. Stay tuned, as there is much more to come from the University of Science and Philosophy. I'm Matt Presti. Have a great day.